Welcome back to Everyday Economics. This is the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, CEO of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network, and you can subscribe to all of our podcasts at americastalking.com. To support Everyday Economics, please make a tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We are recording this episode on Friday, December 13th, and joining me, as always, my friend and colleague, Dr. Orphe, Divounguy, PhD, economist. Dr. O, I was scanning the headlines this morning on the state of the housing industry, and depending on the contributor, and I don't know. I mean, it's all over the board. Some people are saying that the housing market's in horrible shape. I have other headlines in front of me that suggest that 2025 might be the closest thing to a stabilized market that we have seen in a long time. Some of the underlying issues still remain. I mean, the supply, we are short on houses. I guess affordability enters into this picture.
Totally.
What is what's your take at this point?
You have this end of the year, right, where supply eases, the number of sellers kind of falls. People delist their homes, waiting for the spring.
Right.
So that's kind of the usual. But despite that, inventory is still higher than it was last year. And that means that basically we have a little bit less demand on the market than we had a year ago, right? So not so many sellers. When you compare sellers to the number of sellers of existing homeowners coming on the market, on the for sale market, you look at it this year, and it's not very far from a year ago. Actually only 0.6% higher in November. We had a little bit more. We had a little bit more sellers at the start of the year, but those who were successful sold their homes, but sellers are not necessarily coming back on the market, and so those who list their homes are seeing their homes stay on the market a little bit longer, and that means inventory accumulates. We have. We had a drop of inventory in November, of course, and that's consistent with every year. This time of year, inventory starts to drop, right? There's fewer sellers, et cetera, et cetera. But inventory is higher than a year ago. So on the demand side, you probably have a little bit less demand than you had a year ago. But I think a lot of people are going to come back in the spring, simply because, mortgage rates, right? Mortgage rates have actually been somewhat favorable this year.
Let's talk about that. Okay, yeah. So like in the last 30 days, I think the rate, I'm pretty sure that I'm on or around the target on this, about 6.75, 6.8%, somewhere in that ballpark on a 30-year fix. That's nationally. That would be the aggregate. I think it's the top 400 housing markets in the United States. What do you anticipate will happen to rates? I mean, we are thinking that we're going to see a cut from Fed Chairman Jay Powell.
Yeah. Again, mortgage rates are really not that influenced by the Fed funds rates. In fact,
that's what I want to talk about. I mean, I think there are still a number of people that are out there that are kind of waiting for mortgage rates to return to some of the more favorable numbers that we've seen over the last, I guess, seven years or whatever.
I mean, remember, this is an interest rate that's it's a long-term interest rate. It's responsive to changes in economic conditions and expectations about economic growth and inflation. And I think the mortgages had dropped somewhat. I think the reason mortgages ticked up a little bit was, first there was the new administration coming in, the idea that potentially trade wars, all that stuff could be somewhat inflationary. A pro-growth agenda means stronger economic growth is actually going to push interest rates higher. Then rates have come down since November. Right, so they peaked. I think if you look at Mortgage News Daily, rate peaked at 7.13 on November 6th. Fluctuated around that 7% range, down to 6.90. So we're about 10 basis points off the high, really. Well, a little bit more than that, actually. 20 basis points, almost 20 basis points off the high. Also lower than last year. Last year, we were about 10 basis points higher last year than we are today, than we are right now. So yeah, I expect a kind of cooling with price growth easing. You have a lot of people, price growth easing, lots of, people on the sideline. I expect sales to increase into the next year. But again, it's really going to depend on what happens to mortgage rates. Mortgage rates expected to be very, very volatile. We're going to continue to see big swings, especially in the first 100 days of the new administration, where we'll see, markets will react to policy changes or ideas that are being floated around by the new administration.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts on that. I mean, it's you're not Nostradamus. You're looking at the data. You're analyzing it.
Let's put it this way: existing home sales likely to increase heading into 2025. We get an existing home sales report next week, and so I'm pretty happy to see price growth easing. Pretty to see inventory increasing slightly and slowly but surely returning to. I don't know if they'll return to the pre-pandemic level, but they're increasing, and I think that's a good thing. A market that's less tight, right? On top of that, you have builders building, so that's good. Buyers have more options. Buyers can take a little bit more time. They have a little bit more bargaining power. You essentially have a return to somewhat of a buyer's market across the country, and I think that's good news for the industry altogether. So I'm pretty optimistic about where we're headed in 2025.
Okay. All right. Well, obviously, we're going to stay in touch on this subject matter as the year progresses, and we'll certainly check back in on that in January. We'll call it good right there. For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other high-quality podcasts at americastalking.com.